And that's where we need to understand both the creative space, the non-physical infrastructures, and the tangible infrastructure that this space requires and needs to be nurtured for us to make it more strong. British Council works in the space of creative economy in different ways. One is through research and advocacy, and here you will see some of our important reports that we have provided. One is a mapping study on Durga Puja, which Sanjay had mentioned earlier. One is the importance of the digital work in the increasingly in the art space. Then there are various other kinds of report, all of which are in are in our website. And it would be great if you could all have a look and see the kind of information and insight it provides. We have a particular study on understanding how gender looks at in creative economy, its impact, the places where it's lost, not heard of, so that those unheard voices can be further heard of. In the context of the UK global context, it's important to remember that creative economy is a very, very important pointer towards the country's GDP and the kind of employment it provides. It is it has been seen that 1 in 4 person in UK works in the space of creative economy. Now, the creative economy is increasingly a sector which is going rapid changes, especially because of the digital art space and the AI coming in. And that's where it's important to understand that it is in creativity that the future lies. What the manually can be done through the AI, but it is through creative economy, with the creative inspirations, creative thinking, we can mold and shape the future in a much more inspiring way. Data, content, creative services, experiences are the fastest growth areas of consumption, and new creators are constantly entering the market. We earlier spoke about influencers, about people in the digital economy, and there's so many other kinds of young people who are doing various kinds of work. Often we do not even know of them. So all of these contribute to the creative economy and makes it a more robust space. I have been mandated to speak specifically about the relevance of mapping of the creative economy. When we look at the mapping, we must understand that the creative economy by itself is is definition is a, includes a definition which we really need to think about. I will not go deeply into the concept of definition, but it's important for us to understand what are the sectors that would come under creative economy and then how we support and nurture those sectors. But in terms of mapping in the UK context, what we see is that the way it helps us to understand is that the sectors which we consider fall under creative economy, we'll able to understand the economic contribution of those sectors. We'll be able to understand the employment that those sector provides. We'll be able to understand the growth possibilities. Growth possibility is very important because as we are increasingly looking at this debate about the AI driven world, we are constantly looking at discussions on how jobs will be replaced. Every day we read articles on coders will now lose their job. These particular medical fraternity will become redundant in many ways. But then where is the growth? The growth is in the creative sector because it's fueled by creative economy, by creativity. And that's why it's important for us to understand how to map and identify the areas of this growth. And once we are able to understand the growth, we are then able to understand the kind of employment projections it will be able to provide and the kind of skilling needs that are needed. Apart from that, it's very also important that when we are speaking about creative economy, it's important to go about beyond the traditional definitions and find out what the young people, what the new innovators are thinking of, and how those sectors can be supported. So that's why it becomes an important and economic social driver. It provides important content for growth to the wider society. And also, once we are able to map the sector, we are able to understand the kind of support, both in terms of safety, skill development, which we earlier spoke about, can we provide to this sector. One of the important aspects of also looking at creative in economy is to understand how we can protect the sector. There is this also this question of legacy and innovation, what the legacy that the country has, which often gets lost. And there is this tendency to mirror the West. Today, there has been a huge discussion. There's an international house which has just started selling Kolhapuri chappals for 1 lakh a pair. We are used to buying Kolhapuri chappals for a few hundred. But this international house has just taken off these designs and selling them. So what kind of protection can we provide to the sector who've been doing this kind of work for decades and now suddenly it's on the shelf of an international designer? Similarly, when we speak to craftspeople and we tell them, why don't you put up your designs, put up your work on the digital space? They say, the moment I do this, the next day it will get replicated and none of my innovativeness will remain innovative anymore. So I'm content to sell in my small micro sector. So that's again, here we very important to understand what does clusterization mean in case of creative economy. In India, there is this concept of every district has its own creative talent, its own creative inspiration. So how do we nurture and protect these particular pockets of talents? And how do, from the micro, we can go to the macro, and then again the micro gets strengthened. And within this micro, there is also the young woman who's sitting in her home and along with her housework doing her craftsmanship, but her face, her work is not getting the amount she should get, but because it's getting lost in the middleman. Similarly, in the micro, there are various other aspiring artists who are not able to sell their wares. So that's where it's important to understand how we can look at clusters and how we can strengthen and nurture them. We all know about India's creative economy. We have the world's largest film industry, there is dance, music, there's jewelry, literature. We are in the city, Festival of Literature City. This city alone, I have been told, has so many literature festivals, one small city, but look at the inspiration and the creativity that is here. We have the Indian wedding industry, which is so very innovative. And we, of course, have the visual arts market, which is one of the most profitable in terms of revenue earning. But how much do we know about all of these sectors? We know they exist, and the creators and the worker within these sectors contribute and earn and grow in their own individual ways. But how much they are able to themselves connect with the larger picture of the creative economy and how much does the larger picture is able to protect and sustain and thereby nurture them. So these are the questions that we need to think about. Another very important point, which was mentioned earlier in the morning, that the creative economy is very, very largely invisible. We ourselves don't know what all it constitutes. And that is why we have to understand how do we map it, how do we measure it, what do we map. We just can't go and walk out and say, oh, I'm today going to map the creative economy, because we don't know what is the creative economy, what constitutes creative economy. So those kind of thinking are important for us to arrive at a definition of what is creative economy, not a definition which casts me in a cast iron shell, but a definition that is very flexible and that helps in bring all kinds of inspiration and innovation that are out there in the field. This particular site tells us the importance of mapping. It will give us larger insight and understanding of the sector. It will help us understand how the creative economy, those particular sectors fare with the other industries and the kind of intersections and synergies that are possible so that the sector doesn't live in silo, doesn't exist in silo, because only when the synergies are possible, a collective growth is possible. We spoke about skills, so when we have a good idea of mapping, we can know what kind of strategizing and training is required. How we can export without our artisans losing their rights and we are just not cogs in the wheel of export, that I just do the rear end work, but my creativity is lost in that space of export. Digitization is a very, very important factor, and none of us can escape from it. So, how do I marry with the world of digitization and make the most of my work? Benchmarking is, of course, very important because that's where the indicators are set and that's where the quality assessment of my work will happen. There are various kinds of mapping exercises that are there. We have done a mapping on crafts in the time of prime climate challenges, and this helps us to understand what kind of crafts practices needs to be regenerated so that the crafts can thrive and become a sustainable source of art and design, because our world of crafts itself is very sustainable. We have done baseline discussions on music with the government of Tamil Nadu to understand how the music industry can further develop and not get lost in the world of IPs. We have done work on the global cities of globals to understand how cities can be creatively curated so that they are thriving spaces of inspiration where people can come and grow collectively. Today, I very briefly speak about the mapping of the Durga Puja. As you may know, it's one of the most important festivals. It's a religious festival in West Bengal. But beyond the religious aspect, it has a very strong ecosystem that it nurtures in terms of the creative economy. Now, we, with the help, with this, along with the Government of Tourism, had done this mapping of the Durga Puja to understand the specific creative areas where where the Durga Puja contributes. So there were certain areas that were taken, like of course installation art and decoration. If any of you have seen it, it's just not the idol that is worshipped, but there's a huge installation art that's created for just a matter of 8 to 10 days, and that is something spectacular. A lot of work goes in that. There's, of course, the idol making, the picture of which you can see here. Particular to this time, a whole lot of literature publications are done. Of course, advertising houses come in with their sponsorships. Films are released, particularly at this time. These panels that are made, they are focused on crafts and design. And of course, there is fashion and retail houses see a boom. So these are the sectors that we studied during the mapping exercise. This was the estimated economic worth of the creative industry around Durga Puja. And these are all revenue that was generated, not any kind of contributions. Apart from the quantitative aspect of each and every sector, there was a quantification of the actual worth that I just showed. There was a quantification aspect of each of the sectors. And finally, there was a qualitative aspect of each of these sectors. Lighting and illumination is a very important part of the festival. Food. And this is again where the informal sector comes in with all its creativity. Families set up food stalls, do things they are good at, and they sell all through the night. Retail, entertainment, crafts and design. Crafts and designs, and these are not only places where revenue is generated, these are also areas where young people get an opportunity to train themselves. Like in the crafts and design space, young people from the government art colleges come and work as trainees along with the master workers. So it's a beautiful blend of earning, learning, contributing in a cultural space. And every year the inspiration is different, every year the design is different. Along with this, of course, whenever there is a festival, whenever there is any kind of creative activity, there is tourism. And that's why cultural economy and tourism is so very related. When you have creative economy of city, you have tourism. And when you have tourism, the city grows, the city learns, city has different kind of exposures. So it's a beautiful ecosystem that we are constantly deriving, curating. And that's where our creative power lies. So this was a very brief presentation on the importance of mapping. Um, just to again reiterate, it's important to reflect on what kind of models we want to create, what kind of city I want to build. It's important to have a vision of my city, a vision of the state, a vision of the country, and how the creativity of that is there in the various sectors come together and make this vision alive. This can only be done when we have a very accurate idea on what is happening in the creative space. And that's where mapping helps us to both quantify what is there as a baseline and how we can grow from it, how we can add to that in terms of skills, thinking, knowledge development, sector development, and the complete ecosystem. And also in terms of the kind of qualitative impact we need, the city needs to develop its infrastructure so that's able to adapt to the new thoughts and the new thinking that is coming. The concept of creative cluster is very important. UK has this concept very strongly, like Manchester City, you may have known, had gone through a difficult time when the textiles had gone through a change, but now Manchester is a thriving place with various kinds of creative industries coming in and has a completely new look to it altogether. So there are these kind of London's Olympic City is another such example, which was built as it's only for the purpose of Olympics, but now it's a thriving ecosystem of cultural artists who've come together and they either they work together or they work individually, but they collectively contribute to each other. So the various ways creative spaces can be developed, curated, and taken forward, but the importance of mapping is very, very essential to take this forward. So I will end here. Thank you so much.